Hi everyone, I'm Ganasini and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got here, my path to this place. I was born, Peggy Goldie was my name, Peggy Ann Goldie. I was born in New York in a small town on Long Island called Port Washington on the North Shore of Long Island in 1954. I have one older brother who's 4 years older than me, Howard. He still lives in Port Washington, and we remain very close. We were very close as children. He was kind of my protector and just loved me so much to have a little sister. I'm one of several cousins that were all older than me and all boys. My mother had two sisters and a brother who all lived kind of in the same area in different towns on Long Island. And so we all hung out together, all the cousins. We were a pretty big family. My grandparents, her parents, lived right next door to us in Port Washington, Eastern European Jews who moved to New York. My grandpa started a hardware store in New York City that his daughters, my aunts and mom, and their siblings all ran, called Simon's Decorative Hardware. And they sold all kinds of decorative handles and doorknobs and cabinet hardware. They're a pretty big deal on the Eastern Seaboard, one of the biggest hardware, furniture hardware stores. And so everyone commuted into New York City. I kind of grew up in that business, worked there through high school. My summers and college intersessions and all spent in New York City working there at Simon's Hardware, along with my brother and all my cousins. A bunch of my cousins all worked there as well. And yeah, it was a very, very happy childhood. Beautiful little town that Port Washington is. As I mentioned, my brother Howie still lives there with my sister-in-law Patty, and we're very close. Very nice childhood. In high school, I wasn't a particularly good student, but I got to do a program called Help Educate Little People, my senior year, HELP, help, that where they let me choose elementary classrooms to assist the teachers in. And it was pretty much like student teaching. I got to get out of taking history my senior year and go into the classroom and work. I think pretty much all morning long, it seemed to me that I was there. I got to choose the teachers, so I picked my favorite teachers from elementary school and worked with my first grade teacher for half of the school year and my sixth grade teacher for the other half of the year. And that really showed me that I wanted to be a teacher. I loved that program and just adored relating to those teachers more as an adult. You know, I was a senior, so I was, 17, 18, and seeing what they did from that perspective after having been a child in their classrooms was just fascinated me, and I loved it. And I went on to to become a teacher. Got my credential. I went to Monmouth College in New Jersey, then I went to the State University of New York in Oneonta, upstate New York, and got a teaching credential from them. And then I ended up moving from New York to Oregon, to Eugene, where kind of following counterculture, I would say, was my main objective, really, in leaving New York. The hippie thing kind of came and went in New York. It seemed like it was more of a fad around the fashions and all, but the ideology never really stuck. And I was kind of, just on the heel of that movement, and I felt like, gosh, this has resonated for me. That's how I wanted to live, and I wanted to pursue those ideas more. And in New York, it was like said and it was over. Most of my friends were just, going to do careers that would, be high paying, and they were just kind of following along in their parents' footsteps. And I never really fit in with that culture, and really, I don't know, it didn't really resonate. So I moved to Eugene, Oregon, visiting a friend who had moved out there. and fell in love with Eugene, absolutely fell in love with Eugene. Got a job in a little hippie preschool and pursued a master's at the University of Oregon there. And that really clicked. I got to work with a professor named Chet Bowers, who changed my life. The man just had a very strong influence on me. It was the first time that I heard anything in my college education that I felt was really relevant to my teaching, really, and that I could use in teaching. And basically what he told me, what he told us was that curriculum and education should start at the intersection of a child's experience with their world and with what people think that they should know. And that just hit me like a lightning bolt. I just was amazed by that. I remember looking around in the lecture hall and everyone was yawning, not, barely paying attention. And to me, it was like a lightning bolt had hit me. I was like, wow. Education should start with the child, basically, and their own experience of their outside world. And so I started using that in my preschool work, really looking at the kids for what's your experience of what's going on here and what I think you should know, what the state thinks you should know. But what's your experience of it and what do you want to do? And I lived in Eugene for about 5 years, slowly getting that master's, and worked in a bunch of different preschools and got all involved with the Oregon Country Fair and that wonderful community of hippies, very creative, crazy, fun people that I just loved. I loved the whole culture there. And then I got offered a teaching job when I graduated, but I was realizing that the weather in Eugene was just so gray, and so I just couldn't put down my roots in a place that I had to leave every weekend to go find the sun. And that's where I was at after 5 years of living there. So a dear Oregon Country Fair friend of mine, Tom Noddy, the bubble guy, some of you might know of him, a performer, told me that I should come to California and look at beginnings and look at the whale school in Albion. And so I took a road trip and I came down and I drove up the driveway at Beginnings in Bryceland and just absolutely fell in love with the whole the meadow and the octagon, and the whole scene just was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And it was in the summertime and no one was around, but I left a note on the door, on the office door, saying, I'm a young teacher, I would love to move here. If you ever need a teacher, let me know. And when I got home, there was a message waiting for me saying, we're so sorry we missed you. In fact, we are hiring. And if you could turn around and come back, we would love to meet you and interview you. And so I did, and I met Peter Rice and Jan, who became my husband later, and some of the parents who had been teaching basically at Beginnings. Beginnings at that point didn't have any credentialed teachers. It was just a school that was started by parents because people wanted something different for their kids, and they had just put together the best program that they could. Very artsy, very, very beautiful, but they wanted a credentialed teacher. And so it was the perfect match. I just fit right in. It was the greatest interview I've ever had in my life. We just all fell in love with each other. And Jan was on that interview committee. Everyone was asking me questions about how I was going to teach English and how I could approach math and how I would deal with discipline. They were trying to get real, to become like a real school with a real teacher. And Jan's only question for me in the interview was, how do you feel about canoeing? How do you feel about taking children on the river on canoe trips? And my mouth dropped open. I just looked at him like, what are you talking about? What? As part of school? And he said, yes, I think it's probably the most important thing we have to share with kids is the love of nature and adventure and teaching them how to use their own body and their own skills to do things that are difficult. And would you be interested in that? And I had never been in a canoe. I had very little contact really with, with nature, a little bit in Eugene. I had a boyfriend who took me out in the woods quite a bit. But I'm a New York girl, and I really didn't know anything what he was talking about, but it sounded great. And I said, wow, if you'll teach me, absolutely, I would love that. And so I was hired, and I moved down. And lo and behold, Jan and I fell in love, and within a few months, I was pretty much living up at Hokahay, was the name of the land that he was a land partner of one of a dozen people or so on 180 acres up at the top of Miller Creek in Bryceland. And so I married into this wonderful, crazy land group and started living with Jan and his 2 daughters. So I was an instant stepmom. He had a 4-year-old and a 10-year-old at the time, who I became very close with. And then we had a son named Bryce about 5 years into our relationship. Bryce was born in 1985. I moved here in 1980. And I loved it. I loved living in the woods and just the whole scene. It was just perfect. And I loved teaching at beginnings. I had no idea really what I was doing beside this idea that children's experience should lead the way, that who they are in the moment should lead the way in curriculum. And so I learned from them, and they learned from me, and I had a wonderful time there. And then when Bryce was born, in my pregnancy, I had some problems in my pregnancy. I had to stop teaching there. I started bleeding in the middle of my pregnancy, and they said, you have to stop teaching or else you're going to lose this baby. We had started Bryceland High School at that point, Jan's grand alternative high school project, also known as Bry High, kind of a takeoff on Skyfish. It was Skyfish School, so it was Sky High, Bry High. And we were very busy. I was very involved with that high school as well, and trying to grow a baby and also support Jan and teach at Skyfish was just too much. As it turned out, too much stress. And so I had to quit that teaching job in the middle of a school year, very stressful. Wonderful people stepped in for me. Diane Richardson, Claro, who was my aide, stepped in for me and finished out the school year for me. And then I got to stay home. Bryce was born cesarean, not an easy birth, but he was just fine. And I got to stay home with him for about 2.5 years until he was ready for preschool. And then by the time I was ready to go back to teaching, then when he was at that age, the people that had replaced me at Skyfish were doing a great job, and I didn't feel that it was appropriate to challenge them in their jobs. I wanted Bryce to have them as teachers as well. And so I started looking around for another teaching job and ended up at Well Gulch School, where I stayed for about 10 years. Wonderful, wonderful little Well Gulch School. I had so much fun teaching there. That's where I think I really came into my teaching. I had a lot of freedom there to just basically do what I wanted in this little 3rd and 4th grade classroom with like 8 kids downstairs in Well Gulch School with a little wood stove and a little tiny classroom. We had so much fun, and I just continued to work with that idea of serving the children who they were and what the state said that they should know, and seeing if I could find that intersection and let it grow from there. And that was my favorite times teaching, I think. That was my creative outlet, was just that curriculum development for how I could come up with fun activities and lesson plans that worked within that context.